Breath of the Wild shows us the Temple of Time and Wolf Link. That means this game takes place in the child timeline, right? But we also see Koroks and Rock Salt. They're from the adult timeline. And the trailer also shows the Master Sword in a suspiciously similar location to that of A Link to the Past, indicating the Downfall timeline. But the game can't possibly exist in all three timelines at once, can it? Well, I've got a theory about all that, but before I get into that, let me just go over some of the connections we already have. I've got to give a quick shout out to NeoGAF user Feltroll, who collaborated all of this on a single thread. I've left a link in the description to that thread, which is also where I get a lot of the images I'll be using, so check it out if you want to. But we see a few different things for each of the three timelines, though the majority are child and adult. For the child timeline, we see the Temple of Time. This is in all of its former glory. Breath of the Wild even says that it is the Temple of Time, which leaves little doubt. One interesting thing to note is the statue of Hylia on the inside, a relic left over from the pre-timeline split. But this is kinda cool actually. Spoiler alert for Skyward Sword by the way, but at the end of the game, the statue falls to the ground, landing at the Temple of Hylia, which, by the way, is later destroyed. Do you know what's built over the same plot of land? That's right, the Temple of Time. One other thing that is noticed is the UFO-like object we see in the sky. What is it? Feltroll, over on the NeoGAF thread, pointed out two different options. The Twilight Portal and the City of the Sky, or Skyloft perhaps. I personally reckon that it is the Twilight Portal. Why? Well, many of the game's key plot points, from what we've seen so far, focus around the Sheikah. While not technically confirmed, it's widely accepted that the Twilight are descendants of the Sheikah clan. So it would make a lot of sense for the Twilight to make some appearances in the game. The other big child timeline connection we have is the Great Bridge. It bears striking resemblances to the bridges from Twilight Princess, which we do not see in any other timeline. For the adult timeline, there's a lot of evidence. For one, the Koroks appear. This is one of the biggest reasons that people seem to believe this game takes place in the adult timeline. The Koroks do not appear in any other timeline, and in fact, the Kokiri became the Korra specifically because of the Great Flood. The Koroks spend the events of the Wind Waker attempting to find a way to remove the flood. Maybe they succeeded. This is further shown by the item found on the Great Plateau, rock salt, which is apparently crystallized salt from the ancient sea. In something we still don't know, which I'll use to tie over to the next part, we have the Old Man. There are two big theories for this guy. Firstly, there's the theory that he has some kind of strong connection with the King of Red Lions, King Daphne No Hansen Hyrule, from the Wind Waker. This is mainly due to his physical appearance as opposed to any other traits he may have. Moving on to the Downfall timeline, the theory for this old man is that he is some callback to the "It's dangerous to go alone. Take this" man from the original Zelda, or any of the other Downfall timeline men. It would be pretty cool for this game to have a reference to the very first game, published all the way back in 1986. The other big reference to the Downfall timeline is the splash screen we get at the end of the trailer, showing the Master Sword, raised up from the ground, encased in its stone pedestal. This scene is obviously set in some kind of overgrown forest, which strongly resembles the one from Link to the Past. So the conclusion that Feltroll came to on this forum is that the game takes place at the very end of the timeline, where all of the timelines had merged back together, but I have a very big problem with that theory. How do three completely separate worlds, with different races, geography, history, and heroes, all magically become one? And don't you dare say magic. I personally think that this theory is not the correct one, but what kind of theorist would I be if I didn't have an alternate theory? Now, don't get me wrong, I agree that this Hyrule is a combination of all three Hyrules, but I don't think it fits at the end of the timeline. No, I think it slots in pretty simply at a much earlier point in history. Now, here's the thing. I was looking at the trailer again, and I noticed the whole "open your eyes" and "wake up Link" a few times in the trailer. Why would they feel the need to say all of that more than once? Well, what most people seem to think is that this is Zelda, or one of the other female characters, telling Link to wake up. And after hearing this, Link wakes up and runs outside and sees the sunlight. But is this truly the case? Is Link truly awake in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? Or is this entire game made up of visions of the future, shown while someone is asleep, while a female outside attempts to wake him up? First off, watch this moderately old video from Zeltik. I know it's a bit random, but it will really help you to understand what I'm about to say. In Twilight Princess HD, in Castletown, 3 carvings are shown, which were not in the original Twilight Princess. One shows a Goron, presumably Darunia, talking to Link and 2 other adults, either in front of or in reference to the Triforce, probably the latter. The next shows 2 Rito talking to Link and a woman. Personally, I think this is the woman from Zelda 2. She has the same appearance and body shape as well as a thick flowing dress. The third slab shows Link and the man from the first picture talking to 2 Okar and a militant Zora. One thing to note is this man's similarity to the Gerudo males, like Ganondorf. This stone is a complete timeline buster. How can the Rito from the adult timeline and the heavily militarized Zora from the child timeline and the Downfall timeline's woman all be together? It just doesn't make sense, unless you think on the words of Aonuma. He mentions the "oh, I see" moments, which will happen throughout Breath of the Wild in connection to Twilight Princess HD, so I'm going to state my full theory properly now. It's a bit out there, but bear with me. In the Ocarina of Time intro, we see Link with nightmares, showing the future of the child timeline. Now keep in mind, this is what he sees in a single night. So what would he see over the space of 7 years? Well, perhaps the entire plot of Twilight Princess, as well as bits and pieces from other timelines which he's inadvertently creating throughout his quest. Thinking along the lines that Twilight Princess HD is actually in a completely separate space in the timeline from the original Twilight Princess, and that Breath of the Wild takes place immediately after, things fall into place. First off, this completely explains why Twilight Princess HD is slightly different from the original, because it's not the original. Next off, Breath of the Wild contains elements from all 3 timelines. In a lot of theorems surrounding the notions of parallel universes, it is stated that all universes exist simultaneously and move at the same rate. If these 3 timelines are ones that Link creates himself, and if he truly does have the ability to foresee the future as we see in Ocarina's intro, then it makes sense that we'd see the extent of all 3 timelines. However, in Link's dreams, it ended up melding together the outcomes of all 3 universes. As I stated before, this is not immediate. For example, at the beginning of his dreams, Link dreams the entirety of Twilight Princess. That's where the stone carvings come into play. Though his visions are that of the child timeline, the one which to this Link is hopefully the real one, there are still elements of the other 2 timelines sneaking into his visions, though his subconscious is doing its best to hide them from himself, keeping them in small, insignificant places in the timeline. This also explains the photo of Breath of the Wild in the Castletown shop, which Link eventually manages to clear from his mind. The voice outside of his dreams is there. Perhaps it's Navi, Zelda, Malon, Rito, or even Impa. Maybe it could be Fi, though by the organic sounding voice, I doubt it. They're in the temple, shaking Link's body, trying to wake him up, but to no avail. On the contrary, instead of waking him up, they negatively affected his dreams, causing the mismatch we see in Breath of the Wild. In fact, with the entirety of 3 timelines, it actually makes sense for this world to be 12 times the size of Twilight Princess HD. Of course, there's no proof for this, but I thought it up and I knew I needed to share it with you guys. I mean, it's not my first super out there theory. I mean, I already said that I reckon that Breath of the Wild would give us Skull Kid's trumpet. Cough cough, watch that theory, cough cough. And as a final point of evidence, you do know this ain't Link's first adventure in his sleep. Anyway, that's it from me this time. But even if you disagree with this theory, or of course if you liked it, if it at least got you thinking, please give this video a big thumbs up, or comment on what you think this could all mean. Or even better, give me a solid share on Facebook, which is always welcome. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to me for some more video game music themed videos from The Gamer Musician.